Remember what's important. On June 5th, a man robbed the Brown Hat liquor store and put the clerk, Pat Johnson, in fear for his life while he did it. 2 days later, Pat Johnson identified that man as the defendant, Sam Smith. That is what's important here. That is what matters here. That is all that matters here. It is what we ask you to remember. It is what Pat Johnson remembered. It is what he testified to here today. But that's not all the information you heard. You see, the defense, in a desperate attempt to create reasonable doubt where there is none, took you down rabbit holes. They took you off the beaten path. They distorted the truth, twisted the facts, misled you, and worst of all, attacked the victim. They put out every trick they knew to try to create reasonable doubt. But the key word is reasonable. And I submit to you, nothing they argued today was reasonable. First, they went after the victim, Pat Johnson. They tried to make his identification seem unreliable. Oh, what? Because he studied the images too carefully? Because he was deliberating? Because he wanted to make sure he made an accurate and thoughtful identification? Because he took the time to make sure that he identified the right person, that he remembered what happened, because he was careful, that somehow that makes him less reliable. Somehow that tarnishes his credibility. I submit to you, it does the exact opposite. He took this seriously. He took the time. He studied everything. And only after he looked at each image did he come to the conclusion, it is number 4. It is number 4. It is the defendant, Sam Smith. He was careful. And the defense attacked him for it. Then the defense brought up this car accident as if it was some gotcha moment. Oh, you have a brain injury and your memory is damaged. Well, let's look at the timeline to see why that doesn't matter. You see, the robbery takes place on June 5th. 2 days later, Pat Johnson identifies the defendant, Sam Smith, as the culprit. And then, and only then, does this car accident happen. Only then does this brain injury happen. Only then do the memory issues start. It starts after Pat Johnson had already implicated the defendant, Sam Smith, as the culprit. This car accident is not important. We even had to bring it up in our direct examination of Pat Johnson because we knew the defense would try to talk about it. We knew they would try to make this argument. We knew it was coming. And we hate that we had to even talk about it here today. But we only did to show you how unimportant it truly is. And finally, and this is probably the most deplorable, the defense actually attacked the victim for not knowing what was under Sam Smith's sweatshirt, for not knowing what this pointy object was. We admit, Pat Johnson doesn't have X-ray vision. He didn't know what is actually under the sweatshirt, but under the law, that doesn't matter. You see, the judge is going to read out to you the elements of the charges we have alleged. Nowhere in them does it require that Sam Smith possessed a handgun, owns a handgun, even knew about a handgun. There is nothing in these charges that requires Sam Smith to have actually had a handgun under his sweatshirt. All that is required is that the victim, Pat Johnson, feared for injury or death. And he did. He told you he thought it was a gun. He told you he thought if he didn't comply with the request that he would be shot, that he would be killed. It does not matter whether Sam Smith just had his fingers under his sweatshirt or if he had an actual gun. None of that matters under the law. All that matters is what one man, Pat Johnson, feared. He told you about that fear. He told you what he was scared of. It does not matter what was actually under Sam Smith's sweatshirt. All that mattered is what Pat Johnson feared might be there and feared may happen to him. Then, after we rested our case, the defense, they brought out their own witness. And this witness truly highlights how desperate the defense has gotten. You see, when they couldn't shake the victim, when they couldn't shake the testimony of Pat Johnson, they brought out Charlie Jones, the defendant's best friend, to try to give you this story, this theory, this concocted alibi. But even as an alibi, it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. It's not important. Because what did Charlie Jones tell you? That at around 11:15, I got a call from Sam Smith asking him to meet me at the bar. But this call that took place allegedly at around 11:15, that's after the robbery. Robbery's at 11 o'clock, then here comes this call. So even if what Charlie Jones is saying is true, it's not an alibi. It doesn't prove that Sam Smith was at the bar. It doesn't prove that Sam Smith was actually away from the crime scene at the time it was being committed. It doesn't prove an alibi. All it is a desperate attempt by a friend to get the defendant out of trouble. The defense's entire case has been desperate. Their entire arguments have been desperate. You see, they know we have a burden. They know we have to prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt. So they're going to throw what they can at the wall and see what sticks and hope you consider it reasonable. It's not. Nothing they are arguing is reasonable, but it's not going to stop them. And when they get up and do the closing, I want you to think, are they about to take us down the same rabbit holes? Are they about to talk about the identification, the car accident, what was under the sweatshirt? Are they going to talk about Charlie Jones? They will. It's going to play out that way. You'll see. Because they are desperate to create reasonable doubt where there is none. We had a burden here today. We had to prove each of the elements of the charges alleged beyond a reasonable doubt. And the judge is going to explain what the elements are of each of those charges. But the main one I want you to focus on is robbery. Because you see, for that charge, all we had to prove was that beyond a reasonable doubt, the defendant, while committing a theft, put Pat Johnson either in fear of injury or took property by force, however slight. And we did that. We proved that. We had Pat Johnson straight from the horse's mouth. He told you how the defendant came in and took the money from the register. He demanded it, commanded it, how he took the money. Now, while he did it, terrorized Pat Johnson, made him think he was about to get shot and killed if he didn't do what he said. He put fear into Pat Johnson last night to get a quick buck. We proved each of the charges we brought today beyond a reasonable doubt. We proved each element beyond a reasonable doubt. We met our burden here today. And I'll tell you something, it's a burden we gladly take on. We gladly take on this high burden because our job is not just to represent the state of Pennsylvania, it is to represent the people of Pennsylvania. We want to do right by those people. We want to do right by Pat Johnson, by the Brown Hat Liquor Store, by everyone. So we gave you the facts. We told you the timeline. We showed you the identification. We proved beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, Sam Smith, broke the law. He is guilty. We ask that you bring back a verdict to reflect that. Thank you.